What's going on? You got the Middle Tech podcast here with Evan and Logan, and this is going to be a special request episode. So we had a couple people reach out on our website and request that we talk about COVID-19 and the effects that it's having on not only the startup ecosystem, but really like the space as a whole. So the whole business community, local businesses, the university. The university is a big part of Lexington. So it's not going to be UK that we're talking to. It's actually going to be EKU, which also is a really big feeder school for Lexington. But yeah, we're gonna spend some time talking about a couple of local effects that are happening around here.
Yeah, so I thought it was pretty cool that we got a submission from our website. Shout out to Chase for requesting that we do an episode like this. And we wanted to kind of take a deep dive into two of the hardest hit industries, in my opinion, that are suffering from the effects of this pandemic. So we're diving in, like Evan said, we're diving into education, talking to a professor from EKU, and then we're also going to dive into the local restaurant scene and small business entrepreneur. So we're going to be talking to Bryce Anderson for that segment.
Yep. So for education, we're going to be talking to my friend Tom Martin. I've known Tom for about 4 years now, 4 or 5 years now. I met him at Fuji. So he was involved in Fuji really early, hung around there, and I met him, and he's become a mentor for me, and we love going back and forth on education. We have I think similar opinions, but we also have very different opinions about education, and so we like to talk to each other about that. And sometimes it turns into heated debates, which is good.
Yeah,
and it's fun. So with Tom, we're going to talk about just how he's been experiencing changes. He's a professor at EKU and is head of their economic development and entrepreneurship and innovation there, and so we wanted to just sit down with him and understand what it's like to have to immediately transition from going to campus and teaching these students in person to now all of it's pretty much Zoom, which has been nuts for him.
Yeah, I'll add this too before we dive into Tom's segment. So we got the perspective of a professor. I would love it if some of the students listening to this, if you guys shot us an email or DM'd us on Instagram or anything like that, if you guys give us the content to talk about, we'll talk about it. So if you're a student listening to this and you'd like to talk about your side of this and how it's affected you as a student, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to highlight some of those stories.
And just to make sure that I get Tom's title right, just because I think it's important, very important.
Yeah.
Interim Associate Vice President for Research, Executive Director, Center for Economic Development, Entrepreneurship and Technology, Assistant Professor of Management, Department of Management and Marketing, and International Business at Eastern Kentucky University. So it's a very influential guy over there. Wanted to make sure we give him that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good call.
Because it's important.
Cool. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so Tom, how has EKU adapted to this major change going on with coronavirus?
Well, given the change, Evan, I think that EKU's done a good job. The administration, the faculty, the staff, they've all responded well, realizing that we're in a unique situation. What's interesting is my calendar was littered with meetings. If you look at an Outlook calendar, would be littered with meetings with week to week. A lot of those meetings have been canceled because they weren't important, or because we're focused on delivering education. Everything else is kind of on the margins. But the meetings we have kept, we've done like we're doing here, jumped on Zoom. People have adapted that pretty quick. We can also look at what other universities are doing. So I think that's at least an important advantage for us, is that our president, Dr. David McFadden, is routinely on telephone calls with the other university presidents, public and private, from around the state, and just taking the temperature of the other presidents. What are they doing? We can either choose to do those things or not. And not every policy that has been implemented has each university followed, but it's a good temperature taking mechanism to say, well, here's what UK is doing, or here's what Western's doing, or here's what EKU is doing. I think that's been very helpful to help with this change, is to have those be able to have those channels open.
Are all those schools communicating pretty well and collaborating on how to handle this whole crisis?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think the I know the university presidents have spoken at least 4 or 5 times in the last
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks. In fact, President McFadden was on the phone yesterday with the university presidents, and he missed a meeting that I was supposed to be in. The meeting ran, missed the next meeting, so they've been in conversation, because this is a once in a lifetime event. And so,
Absolutely.
what's the first step? What's the second step? Nobody has the answer, but if I have an idea of what the first step should be, for President McFadden to be able to ping that off of President Capilouto
Mm-hmm.
in UK, or President Morgan in Moorhead, whatever it be, that's really a good benefit for them.
Yeah. You mentioned Zoom as a technology you guys have adopted. How else? What are some other technologies, and how have you been using technologies to help you get through this?
Well, let me just first say that for perspective, I was mad when we went from chalkboards to whiteboards. So I am not an early adopter when it comes to tech in the classroom. I like having students in the classroom, but I think we've done a good job. I mean, we're using Zoom. I just 10 minutes ago had 68 students in a Zoom class. They were able to chat and send me messages on the side. They were to wave their hand. We didn't have anybody that wasn't there, that wasn't supposed to be. We're also using YouTube to upload video content. I'm linking to a lot of stuff on YouTube. We're using Camtasia and Snagit for recording options. We're using Google G Suite and Google Drive for sharing content. And then over the weekend, I used something called Zencaster. So I interviewed um, a person out at a VC out in Colorado, and he had the Zencaster um, equipment. And so he said, "Well, I'll do the podcast, and then I'll email you the file." And that worked out real well. So there's EKU is using a lot of different tech, and I'm not even talking about the traditional eCampus delivery, because I'm sure they're using a whole bunch of other tech that I'm not even sure of. That's the tech I'm aware of.
Yeah. And how has your course changed? So you talked about what kind of technologies you're using in the classroom, or now outside of the classroom. But what about your actual course, like your
Well,
curriculum and stuff?
yeah. So everybody became a startup in and around March 10th, right? Whether it be higher education, you guys, Avail, Awesome Inc. We all had to readjust, basically start from scratch from the beginning. And I think that teaching in class is no different, because it's one thing to be in front of 70 students, or I also teach an MBA class in front of 8 students. Let's use the 70. It's one thing to be in front of 70 students and being in front of a PowerPoint presentation with a clicker just kind of clicking through slides. Those PowerPoints, at least for me, are my reminders of what I want to talk about next. They're not necessarily for the student. The student benefits from having my line of thought, and so they can write notes under each of those bullets because I give them those. But those are for me to say, oh yeah, I want to talk about A, B, C, and D. Well, you can't do that in the virtual space the way that, I mean, from taking it from the classroom to the virtual space. So basically, I've had to do a new prep for each class that I teach. So we're starting brand new, redoing the PowerPoint slides, embedding audio into each slide where appropriate, putting video in slides where it might be appropriate, tagging to articles, other audio content where appropriate. So I think that that's been a big change. Now for MBA courses, my MBA that I teach is a impact capstone, which is all the students have gone through the entire program. I get them at the last class. Well, we were supposed to work with an external client where we meet with the client and do a lot of work embedded with the client in their job. That was changed dramatically. So we're trying to do that with Zoom. We'll see how that goes.
So looking at all this change that's going on and how all these schools are using this technology and using it pretty effectively, because I don't think this would even be possible without the technology we have. Do you think this changes the way education is perceived and the way education is distributed from here on out into the future? Because I mean, I feel like it's going to be hard to make the argument that you need to be in class after all this has been able to go on online.
Well, I will tell you this though: the students, and I asked them tonight because I said I'm going to be coming on with you guys. 68 students. How many of you prefer this delivery over being in class? Even though it's more convenient, it's a cost savings. It doesn't cost as much because we don't have to have the buildings. I mean, to your point about what's the future, not one student said this was a better way of doing. And these students are, I mean, being in front of a screen, being on tech, that's their life, right?
Yeah.
And so that none of them, 0 out of 68 said this is a preferable mode of delivery. And I think that for example, and I'll give you the great example, the VC that I talked to in Colorado. Traditionally, I would have said, man, I'd love to have him in class.
Mm-hmm.
You know, next time you're in Kentucky, we'll just we'll fit you in. This way, I talked to him this week and pinned it into a Blackboard site, and the students got him right away. So it's not like having him here, but it's a good alternative.
Yeah.
But I think that it is convenient. But I mean, to you guys, if I had Larry Page and Sergey Brin from Google, I'm like, hey guys, come in here real quick. Instead, Logan and Evan, they can't be here, but man, it's convenient and it's a cost savings. But they wouldn't want to meet you. Yes, you would, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd want to be here, right? So I think that Spotify is convenient and a cost savings, but man, I've got a lot of vinyl, and I think that we're going to continue to see that. We've invested a lot in this socialization that takes place on campus. I think that and this is probably why nobody puts me in charge, but freshmen, sophomores, juniors, I think it's important for them to be on campus and to have that socialization.
Absolutely.
Maybe not so much for adult learners or seniors even, but I think that we need to be real careful about having come out of this and say, well, look, we just throw everything online. We can throw some things online, and having a VC from Colorado jump on at a moment's notice and provide asynchronous content, which means the student is watching and learning at a different time than the content's being delivered, that has some advantage. But so does being in the classroom, me feeding off the student, me engaging with the student. I think that and we shouldn't want to lose that. I think culturally, universities need to say, that, this has got some fine points, but being in the classroom, that engagement that takes place day to day, is a far superior mode.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying about having freshmen and sophomores on campus. I mean, I really enjoyed my experience at UK, but I think I got more out of the pulling me out of my comfort zone socially and challenging me to learn how to meet people and hold conversations, and that whole aspect of it is the same amount of value as the degree that I got as a result of going to that school. So I don't think that you can replace that online, because I'm sure in your classroom you have these very intimate interactions with your students. It's a lot harder to have those online. Those moments don't present themselves as often.
And intimate conversations that don't go well, right? If a student is doing poorly and you have that uncomfortable conversation, those conversations, you need to know how to be able to react to those conversations, adapt, and move on.
Yep.
And you go out in the real world, you've never had that opportunity, and someone gets down your throat about your poor performance, and you say, well, I've never had that happen to me. That's not a good thing. You need to have that. And the consequences, guys, of what we do in the classroom relatively are low, right? If you get a bad grade in week 3, it's not like that we close up campus and say, well, Logan failed. Everybody head to the cars. We're heading out. No, you got 15 more weeks or 14 more weeks, whatever it is, to make up your grade, and we're there to piece you along the way. Mm-hmm. You do poorly in your job in week 3, and they're like, well, we didn't really know if Logan was the right fit, and you do screw up, they're going to get rid of you. We don't do that here. And so I think there is real benefit to that, continually teaching, continually mentoring and coaching, that refined performance appraisal that we do in real time, where the consequences are, you got a bad grade in week 3, but we got 15 more weeks to improve upon that.
That's a great perspective and a great point. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we could do a full episode just talking about education and your perspective as it relates to COVID-19.
We should. Evan and I have had some conversations.
Tom and I are always talking. Yeah, Evan's told me about some of your conversations and some of the critiques that you give him about. Evan likes to bash on the educational system every now and then, doesn't he?
He does, and I like to correct him, so that works out real well. But I mean, Evan makes some good points, and Evan would not disagree about what you said about the experience of the being on campus. He doesn't disagree with that
No.
assessment at all. So I know what his opinions are, and I love to come back and make that case to you guys sometime.
Yeah, we'll
Absolutely.
do it. Awesome, Tom. Thanks, man.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
appreciate you coming on. Talk to you later. All right, guys. We hope you got some insight into what the educational institutions are actually going through right now. We really enjoyed that conversation with Tom, and Tom, if you're listening, thanks for coming on and talking with us.
It's been crazy to see the education part.
Oh yeah, I have a brother who's in college right now, and just talking to him, I know you and I have talked a couple of times about if they go all online courses in the fall, it's going to be pretty crazy to see the amount of kids that either choose to just get a job during this time and wait until things get back to normal, or opt for a university that's cheaper but offers online classes as well. Or
I was thinking about like the high school seniors. You know, if I'm a high school senior and I'm about to go to college and I can't go on campus, then I'm not sure why I would go.
Exactly. Yeah.
If I'm paying the same prices.
Yeah. I've got a cousin that's in Dave Herfel. I'll give him a shout out. He got a scholarship to go and cheer for Purdue. And I was actually wondering how that's going to affect him through all this. You know, you've got that scholarship lined up, but there's not going to be football or basketball. There's not going to be anything for you to go and actually, exercise your scholarship for. So,
and I feel bad for the professors because, like, I'm sure they love getting up in front of those students and teaching.
Yeah.
I speak to a couple entrepreneurship classes, and I did it both of those last couple of weeks, and it's just not the same.
No, not at all.
You can't feed off the energy. You can't get questions.
I mean, we feel that when we do these Zoom calls. Like, it's great to be able to do them during this, but the energy is just not the same. To not actually be able to shake someone's hand and sit here next to him and talk to him, it's a different feel.
You can't read their faces easily.
Exactly. So. Yeah. All right. So for this next segment, like I mentioned, we sat down with Bryce Anderson. So Bryce is somebody that's got his hand in a lot of different businesses here in Lexington, and businesses that have been affected pretty seriously through this pandemic. So Bryce is owner of Breakout Games. He is owner of Vinaigrette Salad Kitchens, and he is a franchisee of Orange Leaf Frozen Yogurts. So all businesses that are brick and mortar that have had to shut down due to this. So we got to talk to Bryce about how he's been dealing with that, some of the planning that's gone into it to try and make sure that his employees can make it through this time as well. And man, I would not want to be making those decisions right now. So I just hope that everything goes back to normal as soon as possible, so that entrepreneurs like Bryce do not feel this for too much longer.
Yeah, I mean, they need people coming through the doors. And I was thinking, before you recorded this, like, what do you think you missed the most in Lexington as far as
Keeneland
restaurants, brick and mortar? Let's talk about the local restaurants. So, like, what are some of the places that
I miss?
Or what do you miss about going to like these in-person places? Because
I miss scootering over to Blue Stallion and having dads and sitting outside. Oh yeah, and just like the atmosphere.
Yeah. We got dads the other day. Yeah. Just picking up from the sidewalk.
It's not the same. It's not the same. All right, cool. We're going to dive into this conversation with Bryce. We hope you guys enjoy. All right, we're sitting here with Bryce Anderson. He's a member of our startup community that's got some franchises around the community that are obviously being pretty heavily impacted right now by COVID-19. So Bryce, thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, how you doing through all this stuff?
I mean, it's something that I've never experienced before. We started our first business almost 10 years ago, and this is by far the weirdest, most difficult thing we've had to figure out. But I think that's the case for everyone in the startup community or the multinational corporation. It's just unprecedented.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know Bryce Anderson, do you want to dive into your background a little bit, and then some of the companies that you're running currently?
Yeah. So me and some friends started we started out with one frozen yogurt shop. So now we have multiple different brands, but in October 2010, we started a franchise Orange Leaf Frozen Yogurt in Lexington, Kentucky. And that grew to, we have a salad restaurant called Vinaigrette Salad Kitchen. And so we have 6 locations of those, and then Breakout Games, which is an escape room company. And we have 44 locations of that. So it's headquartered here in Lexington, and I do a lot of the branding, marketing, real estate, website, those type of activities for the different brands.
Yeah. So obviously very brick and mortar type organizations that we were just talking there for a second. You pretty much had to shut down completely for this whole pandemic. So, I mean, when did you realize this is something very serious that is going to have a pretty drastic impact on all these businesses?
I think in January I did a little bit of travel and talking with our business partners. I mean, part of I think what it means to be an owner and an entrepreneur is to try to look into the future and to try to make predictions on what might happen and to set yourself up for success
Mm-hmm.
by playing to those predictions. And it is something that we were talking about for a long time before it really hit. And so January is when it really started, as I began looking at what cities I was going to travel through and did they have corona, especially coming back. So the end of January, I remember thinking, I'm really glad I'm not going through
Yeah.
Italy. And but when it really started impacting us was the week of March 13th, and that was the week that the NBA shut down,
Yeah.
NCAA shut down, and that's when our revenues really dropped. Before
Mhm.
then, it hadn't affected really anything, but it seemed like it was coming.
Yeah, I remember that week pretty clearly. I actually remember seeing you that week because I think that was the final time that Evan and I ate out together. We were there. We were at Vinaigrette
Yep.
for a middle tech meeting, and you passed by. But it seemed like that week just lasted forever because it was just
Yeah.
one thing after the next. Like Keeneland got canceled, and then March Madness got canceled, and it was just kind of a surreal world there for about a full week. Of oh my gosh, this
And it
is.
just kept building.
It just kept building and
Yeah.
building, and then
Yeah.
came to a head. Yeah. Yeah.
So put us in the head of somebody like you that owns restaurants. When all this started to take place, the first thing that goes through your head as a restaurant owner is what? What? How does this affect you immediately? And what went through your head?
I mean, I think the first thing is how do we keep our place clean and how do we keep our employees healthy and our guests healthy? 'Cause you don't know if it's going to be something that's going to pass quickly, and we just need to make sure there's no outbreak in our restaurants or escape rooms. Or, but it starts with the health and cleanliness. So we step those things up, made sure if there's anyone who is feeling at all sick that they should not come in, and we say that anyways. But we really each shift we would talk to people and make sure that there was no one there that wanted to still come to work but felt a little bad. And then immediately after that is obviously revenue, because revenue really solves a lot of problems in business. And if you don't have revenue, you don't have a business.
Mm-hmm.
It's we say if there's no revenue or profits, it's more of a hobby than a business. It's a,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so we when it really started tanking in terms of the revenue, I think it happened all over the country. First, it was really in Seattle, and you see our revenue numbers down 70% in the restaurant industry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Open Table has some really good data about that if you're interested in looking at it. But they're tracking it by city what the revenue differences are. And so once that started dropping, then we began to think, what do we need to do to give us the best chance of success when this opens back up, whether it's 2 months or 4 months or 6 months. And most of our decisions that we made once we saw the revenue start dropping were based on that. And so a lot of that's based around cash, a lot of that's based around the employees. Um, and and so we began closing kind of one-off locations, especially when it became state mandated. And then eventually for breakout, we closed all our locations. Pretty much within a week, all of them were closed.
Yeah.
And then we closed 3 vinaigrettes, but still have 3 left open, and we closed our orange leaf locations.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys we're going on a month now of this shutdown and this quarantine period.
Yeah.
What does this look like downstream now that stuff has been closed for a month and all these businesses are missing out on prime time for making revenue? You know, it's springtime, everyone's coming out again after winter. What does this downstream effect look like? And maybe to add to that, what does it look like now that we've got these disaster relief loans that are going out?
Yeah, I mean, I think survival is the word that I think a lot of people are using. How do you survive to get to the end? No one's thinking about how do we make money during this
Mm-hmm.
time. It's really how do we continue paying the employees we're able to, and then how do we make sure the employees that we've had to furlough are in the best case, the best spot possible.
Yeah.
So I mean that the effect goes. Customers lose confidence in going out and even being around other people, which leads to loss of revenue. And then you have a combination of state mandates that close restaurants. And so I think those do play into each other. And a lot of people are talking now when the government, federal government or the state government, when are they going to open the economy back up? But I think a big part of it is, when do people have confidence to go out and
Yeah.
interact with people and sit shoulder to shoulder
Yep.
with someone that they don't know, or even with someone that they do know.
Yeah.
So that's really where it started. And so now we still have 3 locations opened, and we're trying to basically make enough money to pay our employees. And then we've cut all future new projects that we might have been working on, our website design, those become non-essential, and so it cuts those costs, and so that hurts those other businesses that do that type of work. And then obviously landlords is a big deal.
Yep.
When you have revenue that's half of what it normally is, and in the restaurant industry especially, your margins are so small, and so no restaurant can really do great on half the revenue they're used to. And so then paying rent becomes really hard. So you have a lot of difficult conversations with landlords, and then landlords have to have difficult conversations with their banks, and then banks have to have difficult conversations with the regulators. And so you are seeing a cascading effect that I think you're going to see in every industry.
Yeah, I think you painted a really good picture of the whole waterfall of how the economy works in general. Just, how if you're a business hiring somebody to redesign the website, that flows down when you have to cut that project, and then before you know it, it's spreading all over the place. And when it's on this massive scale in the way that our economy works, it pretty much shuts down the entire country and the entire way that we operate.
Yeah. And I think this is where the long-term investment and relationships do matter a lot. We've tried really hard to engage with our landlords as we go through this, and engage with our contractors as we go through this, instead of saying, we're not paying you anymore, we'll see if we ever work together again. Really involving and having, because it is people, we're people running the business, and they're people running their businesses. And this is where, when you've worked with someone for 5 years, you can talk like friends, and the goal is that we both come out on the other side of this. And so how do we make sure that happens? And when you have a lot of people having that type of conversation, it allows you to increase your chance of success on the other end. If you have people being really protective and saying, we got to do what's best for us, I'm not going to engage in a conversation with you, I think that's when you start to get into a war with people. And thankfully, we just haven't been in that spot. We just have really, really thankful for the landlords that we have, and the contractors that we have, and the employees that we have who understand. And it's the hardest thing to furlough people. Furlough our friends, furlough people that have worked with us for a lot of years and given a lot to our companies. And it's obviously it's not personal, but it just affects you personally. It affects us personally. So it's been a hard thing to do things that we hate to do. But I think on the other end of it, in 2 months or 3 months, whenever this is over, I think we've set ourselves up at the best possible way to be able to come out and reopen. So that's the whole goal, in making decisions quickly, and furloughing quickly, and closing locations quickly.
So what do you do from here? What's the next move? And when this opens back up, have you guys planned on what that looks like?
Yeah, I think there's so much unknown. There's two factors, I think, in this whole equation. One is the depth of the virus, and how many people get it, how many people die, and that's a catastrophe. And I think that's where the medical community is really working, and that's the flatten the curve, is to decrease the depth. And then from the economic sense, the length is what's really important. How long is the economy closed down? If it's 2 more weeks, or is it 2 more months, or 6 months, the length of that is a big deal. How long can landlords go without receiving rent? And that depends on how long they can go without paying their loan. And so I think that's what is really hard in the unknown. Even with the stimulus packages, there's just so much unknown. And the government, printing $2 trillion and giving out $350 billion, and trying to ask for another $250 billion, but trying to get it out into people's hands in a week and a half. that's really difficult to do.
Yeah.
And so it seems like everyone is working together, and the camaraderie in this is pretty neat to see. But there's so much unknowns, and we expect in order to open up again, it's going to take some work and it's going to take some cash. Um, I don't know if it's going to be a mandate's going to come from the state, and then people will be allowed to go to restaurants, but then it'll be trickle in and it'll come up slowly, or people will be so sick of being indoors. And if a medical breakthrough happens, then it'll be a flood of people going out. And it matters a great deal which trajectory it takes.
Yeah, that's a great point on if it's all at once or if it's like a trickle effect. Like,
Yep.
I think everyone would love for it to be all at once. It's a big party in the streets and everything. I think that's the best case scenario of it's just boom. Everyone's comfortable with going back to the way things were because they're going to have a lot more confidence if there's a vaccine of some sort to actually give protection against
Well, you start to appreciate the ability and the experience of going to a restaurant.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
and just sitting there in the restaurant, talking with the people preparing your food. Like it's totally different when you just pull a phone out and just order on a phone. It's a totally different experience. Part of the experience of the food industry is getting that in person. Sit down and enjoy it, or speak with the people preparing your food. That's part of the experience.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting. I think it is really important. The cliche phrase is hope for the best, plan for the worst. And I think a lot of times you do see people hoping for the best and planning for the best. And it doesn't get you very far.
Yeah.
If it takes off and in a month we're blowing and going, that is great. But that is not what I'm expecting. I'm expecting it to take some time. I think the confidence levels need to be high, and even if revenues go from being down, I think restaurants are like down 40 to 60%, depending upon the restaurant. For those that are open, for those that are closed, it's zero, obviously.
Yeah.
To go to being only down 20% is not great.
Yeah.
So it'll be really interesting. Luckily, we just have a really good team, and we have a good group of owners who we get to talk through this, so I don't have to make this decision all on my own, which is really helpful.
Yeah, that's big for sure. Having a team to go through this that has your back and is navigating this together. So to wrap this up, something that I've seen that I thought was really cool is this whole Lex Unite thing, and seeing the community kind of rally behind some of these local businesses. Would you mind just talking for a second about this community support that you've seen, and if there's anything that you'd like to kind of say to the community on continuing to do this support and how we can support you best?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like what people's priorities should be, and I think a lot of times people either insulate and just try to protect themselves, but I think that is a step in the process. If you don't try to protect what you have and think about how do we open up in the most successful way in 2 months, you have a lower chance of actually opening, and it's not good for you, your landlords or employees or the community. So I think taking a step to take inventory of what you have and what you need to do, but then begin looking at how you help others. And I think we're kind of at that stage now that things have been closed down for 4 weeks, and there's some really, really cool things. The YMCA opening up to take care of the child care for all the healthcare workers was a big deal. And so Vinaigrette, we're bringing salads to them multiple times a week to
awesome.
feed the people babysitting those kids. And you just see so many different things around the city. I think the Lee Institute or the Lee Foundation is serving meals to the healthcare or to the restaurant workers over at Great Bagel off Boston Road, free of charge. And you have some people that are going to receive unemployment, and some people that are going to receive this extra $1,200 check. But there's some people who are a little more off the grid, and our restaurant industry is a lot of times fueled by people that may not get those checks. And so that's a really neat organization. There's a lot of things like that happening. That's exciting to see. But it is hard when everyone is hurting. It'd be helpful if like half the people are doing great and half the people are hurting. So then it'd be easy to know where the money should flow.
Yeah, for sure.
But it does bring you more together. And
absolutely.
That's happened with a lot of our talks with employees and contractors is kind of we're all in this together, and we'll all come out of it together.
All right, guys, we hope that conversation with Bryce gave you some insight into what entrepreneurs who own these brick and mortar establishments are really going through during this time. These establishments that just cannot function when the economy is not actually open. So now we'd like to just give you guys some updates on the podcast, what we've got going on, and how we've kind of been adapting and handling all these changes. As I mentioned before, as we were transitioning into Bryce's episode, it's just different right now, right? I mean, we can't get the same connection with our guests as we'd like to get when they're sitting right here next to us, and we're looking at each other in the face. And doing it on Zoom is great. We're happy to have the capability to do that and to continue on through this pandemic. But yeah, it's just not the same, unfortunately.
Yep. Zoom quickly became, I was thinking about this the other day, Zoom quickly became an important part of like the telecommunications industry. Mm-hmm. It almost became like a telecom company. It's like people aren't picking up the phone, they're Zooming. They're not doing conference calls, they're Zooming. It's really like the technology is just adapted and changed so much over time, and it like really wasn't so apparent until now. It's like I don't call people as much anymore. I just tell them to get on Zoom or
I mean, especially for group meetings, you're not going to have, well, I guess maybe older generations still prefer a conference call, but I think it's much better to have be able to see somebody's expressions, and you can at least have a little bit of that reading expressions and body language through Zoom, not as much as you would in person, obviously, but still.
Verizon, so I mean, obviously one of the biggest telecom providers, bought Blue Jeans.
Were you the one that sent me the meme?
It was a funny tweet about it. I'll have to find it. But I mean, Verizon Wireless bought a Zoom competitor, and it was basically like Zoom. The meme was like Zoom in a executive meeting was like, we got to buy, or Verizon was like, we got to buy Zoom. And everybody was like, well, it's like 1/3 of our market cap. And they're like, okay, just buy Blue Jeans.
Well, okay, so for people who don't know what Blue Jeans is, I had to educate myself a little bit on this as well because I'd never heard of Blue Jean. So despite the name Blue Jeans, it's actually a much more dressed up version of Zoom, as I understand it.
I used it for Viacom when I used to work with Viacom.
Is it nice?
It's kind of clunky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
not as user friendly.
Okay. Let's say a more dressed up version of Zoom. That's just what I'm going to leave it at because I don't know a ton about it. But yeah, some other stuff going on with the podcast. What else we got going on?
We are launching a newsletter at the end of this month. So Nico and I have been working on that a lot, and that's going to be exciting. So we're going to try to reach you guys in a new way. Podcasts are great. These videos that we're doing are good, so you can actually see our faces, a little bit more. And now we're going to do newsletters, and we've got some exciting ideas for newsletter. There are newsletters out there. For sure. I mean, everybody subscribes to newsletters, and they've just kind of become just a regular email for a lot of people. Yeah. And sometimes you just get it and delete it. But we're talking about ways to do it a little bit different, which is exciting. More news to come. Cutting edge stuff. What else? We've got some good content coming out. We're going to try to get you guys a little bit more information on kind of like why we started Middle Tech and what Middle Tech is and what it's going to become. So that's important. We always try to tell you guys, the story of Middle Tech and why we did it. I think that helps you guys, connect with it a little bit better because it's really important to us, and hopefully, the tech ecosystem is important to you, so it's important to know that why. So we're making some content around that. But we've also got a big event coming up next month in partnership, or we are partners with Startup Grind.
Yeah. I'm really excited about that. So this is kind of goes back to just being adaptive during these times, and a lot of these events that would have otherwise been in person have now been moved to a virtual space. Yeah. And Eric reached out to us and had this idea for an event, and we've been brainstorming on it, and we've got a really cool guest speaker lined up, and I think we're gonna have some really cool content, pretty much specifically aimed at those people who are about to go into the real world in one of the worst job economies that we've seen in our lifetimes.
This is probably the worst time to graduate in U.S. history.
That's
probably.
Maybe Great Depression. Maybe I guess you could say.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of close.
Yeah.
As far as like right now, jobs. Nobody's gonna be hiring. Very few people are gonna be hiring. I don't want to say nobody. I don't want to break a lot of hopes, but it's not good.
But we have the good news there is that we have some what we think is really valuable content on how to navigate this if you are a senior in college about to graduate and just honestly a little bit freaked out, like I know we would all be if we were in those shoes. So
we're trying to instill, a little bit of the entrepreneurship mindset,
Yeah.
to these graduating students.
I think that's super important.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these students, it's just the nature of college. You go through college and, it's hit this benchmark, get this grade, graduate or get through this class, get this final done, and you just keep going through college, and it's just step by step by step, and that's not how the real world works.
No.
And so when you come to a time when you're supposed to be graduating, the next step is you get a job, and that step is not there, students are going to freak out because they were not taught or prepared for that. That they're not prepared for that.
Yeah.
They're supposed to get a job right after college. Like that's why, these counselors work with them so much, and that's why you go to college. And if that's not there, then they're going to have to completely change their mindset and understand a totally different mind frame, which is, entrepreneurship and the way to approach that, or at least the way entrepreneurship thinks. An entrepreneur would think about, uncertainty. Uncertainty is a large part of, entrepreneurship. You never know what's going to happen. You don't know if your idea is going to work. You never know if what you've been working hard on is going to grow. And it's just always that uncertainty, and entrepreneurs know how to handle that very well, the successful ones.
Yeah.
So we just want to kind of, prepare students for that level of uncertainty that's going to be happening without a question in their lives. It's not a matter of if they're going to come out of college and have these uncertain times. It's just a matter of, how they're going to handle it, because it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah. And I think we'll have some good, not only our guest speaker is gonna have some awesome advice for it, but I feel like you and I are going to be able to speak to this pretty well, because one, you're in the middle of starting a company, and I've started doing some different nonprofit stuff, just trying to find ways to help out right now. And I will say this time is really exciting because new problems have arisen that you are not used to seeing. So if you can just recognize those problems and go after something right now, it's kind of like the Wild West out there right now in terms of just new problems popping up and people searching for different solutions for things. So we're really excited to bring that content to you guys. Stay tuned for more information on that, because we're still hashing out details, but we'll be providing updates as we get closer to that date.
Yep.
Cool. All right, you guys, have a great week. See ya.